There we are. Hi, welcome everybody to In Other Words. Really appreciate everybody being here. We've got an extra special guest with us today. So thanks for joining In Other Words. Please don't forget to go like our Facebook page, join this video. We'd love to have you and stay tuned for what's coming up next. But without further ado, our special guest, John Smaby. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, very well. I'm excited to be on the program today.
Well, this is wonderful. How's the team doing? How's everybody doing? Lee, Evan, y'all doing okay?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome.
Wonderful. Jody's on assignment. As we were doing our morning text this morning, it seems like all of us were out doing things, which was something unusual. Normally we're waiting around for this time. Now we actually have things to do and are kind of flying in. So that's awesome. So Lee showed property. I went to a closing. Evan, what'd you do?
Some leadership training this morning.
Super.
Yep.
Well,
and you know what? I did the most important thing.
What's that?
I looked like Lee earlier this morning.
Oh, yeah.
And I got my hair cut today for the first time since the beginning of February. I could about had a ponytail.
Oh, wow. Are there pictures? I would have liked to seen that.
Yeah, they're pictures. We could show you.
I think it's an RPAC fundraiser is what that is.
That's right. That's right. I almost donated mine. I felt like I lost about 20 pounds when I got my hair cut last week. So it was awesome. But all right, this week's word, empathy. So typically what we do, John, is we're going to throw it to you. You kind of kick us off and just kind of tell us what that particular word means to you. And then we'll kind of filter the show around that. So fire away.
Well, empathy has been a very important part of my journey. And a lot of the last 25 to 30 years of my journey in the real estate business was in management. And so I don't know that I'm a lot better at it today than I was then. And a few things I've learned along the way is I think a lot of empathy is learning how to listen.
Right.
And I worked in offices with as many as 200 agents managing, and you find out there that one message does not work for everyone. And I don't feel you can be, and this gets down to your clients every day and how you deal with them, is that one message does not work for your clients. And the more that we take the time to understand and to take the time to listen, and I think that empathy goes with trust. I don't think that you can have trust if you aren't showing your clients, if you're willing to listen, and empathy. So just a quick story that I learned in kind of the hard way is that in an office and in a Tuesday meeting in Minnesota, and I'm all excited. We've had our biggest month ever, and I'm blah, 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 blah. And I probably got about 80, 90 agents in the room. And afterwards, I had a few agents come up to me and they said, I felt really bad after this. I said, why? We just had our greatest month ever. And I said, well, I didn't. And, I learned then is that maybe the message had to be different. And that agent, so in the future, what I did is that we talked, maybe there was more of emails and things about great months, but I didn't make a big thing of it because what I learned is that a third of the people in the office didn't have the best month ever. And was I doing the right thing for them? We want to celebrate that the market is good and give those stories, but I learned that it's I really wasn't very good at it, and I really had to change my focus.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So listening versus empathy, Evan, what say you from an empathy standpoint?
Well, I mean, listening is its own thing to begin with. A lot of people, air quotes, listen, but they're not taking in and trying to hear what the person is trying to say,
So is there a difference between empathy and listening?
Oh, yeah, because empathy involves feeling. I think of empathy means feeling with somebody else, relating to and actually trying to understand them well enough to feel what they're going through. And I think it's tricky for realtors because we want to be empathetic, but we also have to be the professionals. So while we need to feel with people, we also have to, be the logical side and the problem solving side and all those other things. So I think there's a line to walk there. But once people feel like you understand what they're going through, then the relationship's a whole different thing, and your ability to help them is a whole different thing. That's how I would separate listening and empathy,
So Evan, and the crew here, is that how has it changed with COVID? I will tell you I think one of the things that I see is that I think we're asking more questions today. And that's a good thing. That's one of the things that I think of that I've learned along the way. How about you guys?
Well, I'll tie it right into what you were saying, John, about the message. A lot of people are celebrating the fact that depending where you live, that things are opening back up. I was in a session just a couple of days ago, and this was with a group of leaders. It was leadership training. And one of the guys said, I still feel stuck on my couch and I don't really know how to get out. Yeah. So everybody's going, yay, we're celebrating. And there's some people, just because the door's open, they're not morally enabled to walk out the door, or maybe have something else holding them back. And here we are celebrating and they're shrinking, going, I feel smaller.
I can pick back on that. I think when we first started, sorry, Lee, but when we first started all this, a lot of title companies and mortgage companies were coming in saying business as usual, nothing's changed, we're still doing good. Which I can understand the theme of their message, but I heard an awful lot of pushback from agents going, things aren't the same. Things have changed. It's not business as usual. So John, kind of to your story earlier, not everybody felt that way. Lee, go ahead.
So I have thoughts about a lot of what y'all have said. First of all, you started with listening, and I want to remind everybody, listening is not looking at someone while you try to figure out what you're going to say next. Right? It's really hearing what they have to say. And if you've got to pause before you respond, that's even better because it builds trust. It helps them know they've been heard, right? It's subliminal, but they know. So then, John brings up COVID. I think there's a lot of really great things that have come out of this whole experience. It bothers me that, so many in our community are scared, or maybe even scared to the point where they're frozen and they can't take action. That concerns me. But on the whole, I'm seeing that we're embracing technology that maybe we wanted to use before, but we were afraid to be the only one or afraid to introduce it. And now we're using platforms like Zoom more and more in our real estate business, than we were before, when we probably should have been before, right? And on a platform like this, I think you have to work harder to listen. So you tend to be a better listener, right? So I think there's positive that's come out of it. I can tell you, I used to always complain. I would send documents to a consumer and say, like on DocuSign, right? And I would say, okay, when you get this, you call me while you're in front of your computer. We're going to go over it. I don't want you to sign what you don't know you're signing. We're going to go over. I was doing all the right things. And then I was getting a DocuSign back when I never talked to him on the phone, or while I'm trying to explain, it would come in my email, right? Because they just don't have that patience. All along, I could have been using Zoom. I've been familiar with the platform for 10 years, but now I'm like, we're going to go over this together on Zoom, and then I'll send you the DocuSign.
Right.
So, we're evolving, and I think it's going to be good.
I think it's a good point. Patrick gave us a good, wonderful quote by Stephen Covey there in the comments. Most people don't listen with the intent to understand; they listen with the intent to reply, which I think that deals with.
Oh, that's a great quote. I'm gonna write that one down.
Yeah, it's
exactly what I said.
I would attribute that to Lee York personally.
Lee York, Stephen Covey. What's the difference?
Yeah. Covey was a little more eloquent. I get that.
Well, hey, So what are some tools? How, let's say that, if an agent were to come in here and say, all right, I want to be more empathetic. What does that mean? How do you go about doing that? Is that is that a skill that you learned? Or are you born with it? Or what do you think?
Me.
Uh-oh, okay.
It's not just listening. It's
Okay.
what you do with what you hear, right? If you listen and go, yeah, that's how you feel, and move on, that's not empathy. Empathy is respecting what you've heard, and whether you agree with it or not, your action, your response is based on what you heard them say, what they're wanting, what they feel, right? Brent's laughing at me. I'm right, y'all.
Well,
It's about action.
disagree. I don't disagree. I think I'm curious about this word because everybody has a definition, and I can take pieces of what John said and what you said and Evan said, and I can agree and sort of disagree with some of those as well. I just think it's an interesting word because I don't know that there is a definitive definition. So John, what do you think are some skills that kind of you need to be empathetic? How did you learn from your experience
Well, I think that, part of it is really being a student, and it's, that is training, and Evan, you do a ton of that. I have learned so much about my body language and how that changes, and active listening. I think over the years that is so important, and you can get a lot of that from some of the great trainers. And I think if you feel like maybe the point isn't coming across and you're not getting through to people and not building the trust, that's the time to reach out to experts to help you. We did some one-on-one training that worked really well for people. So nobody has the answers. I think that in today's world, especially, is that I think you can't take anything for granted. And you have to make sure that there's so many things that are affecting how we show empathy,
Sure.
okay, how we, in today's world.
What about empathy between agents? Like we talked we have to have empathy with our clients in order to serve them better. But what about with other agents?
Well, I think a good one, Brene Brown says, assume that the other person is trying to do doing their best. And I think if you're going to go for a one-liner, that's a great one. It is kind of give people the benefit of the doubt, the grace, whatever word you want to use, that they are trying their hardest rather than putting our own story on them.
Yeah.
And then that changes your perspective, and I think opens up your ability to then put yourself in their shoes. And by the way, the practical side of that is that leads to more sales. When you can improve the relationship, reduce conflict, it makes you a better negotiator, a better problem solver, and you help put people in houses. And that's what we want to do,
Y'all, we need the sound effects. So when somebody says something really good, we hear cha-ching, right?
Well, let's think about it from another perspective, is that there are certain agents in my market who I really like to do business with, okay? And I've told clients that they do a great job. What does that mean? It means I have some trust in them, that the relationship, maybe what do they make me feel good? They make me feel good, okay? Boy, that's a great skill, because you know what? I walk into that house with my clients. I know that the expectations are high, and I receive good results.
Sometimes I just feel good when they return my call.
That's probably a more reflection on you than it is on them, Lee.
Do what?
It's probably a bigger reflection on you than it is on them.
Yeah, it may be.
Our zinger. So, from that standpoint, I mean, Evan and Brene Brown's quote, I always look at Gladwell when he talked about sort of the default to truth, right? We sort of have a default to the truth and sort of assuming the other person is doing their best. I find myself doing that a little bit more. But Evan, I wanted to touch on something that you said a minute ago. Do you think that empathy means you have to feel what the other person's feeling, or do you just have to understand what the other person's feeling?
Well, I think if you're good, the word empathy, I think you're feeling what the other person is feeling.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that you, on a more like tactical level, when it comes to negotiating, you can understand what the other person is feeling, and use that as a strategy without necessarily having to use empathy, you know. But I think empathy is about feeling what the other person is feeling.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's sympathy or it's some other thing, you know.
Well, I look at it a little bit different. I don't necessarily, I need to know how you're feeling. I don't know that I need to feel what you're feeling, but kind of to John's point, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit. It's empathy to me is making sure the other person feels like they're being heard, like they're being understood. And I don't necessarily need to be in your shoes, but I can certainly sympathize. And if you feel like you're being heard, I think the message kind of gets across.
Well, let me differentiate that.
All
So
right.
if you take a spill and break your leg, I don't have to feel the broken leg to empathize with you, but I can try to feel what it would feel like to be lying on the ground with your leg broken and having nobody there to help you. You know,
Okay.
I would say that would be empathy without having to actually feel the thing, you know?
Okay.
Sympathy is feeling, I'm sorry for you. I'm sorry you broke your leg.
Yeah.
Well,
All right.
I'm sorry you broke your leg. How can I help?
Okay.
Right? I mean, don't we have to use that empathy? Doesn't there have, I'm going back to action, but don't we have to take some action?
But well,
I mean,
Ooh.
possibly. But I think that's the point is once you feel what the other person is feeling, now you're in a better position to figure out what has to come next. Sometimes it's just acknowledgement. Sometimes it's like, oh, dude, you broke your leg. That sucks. And I understand where you're at. It doesn't necessarily mean you need me to splint it. There might be some other solution, you know? But I think it starts with trying to feel what the other person is feeling.
Okay.
And I think that
Yeah, we're coming together.
reminds me of another story with an agent. And as a manager, I was in a hurry one day with a new agent, and agent was in my office asking questions all the time. Those of you who've been in that situation, and that can be, it can be tough at times. I was in a hurry and I said to the person, I said, hey, you know what? I trust you. You can get this done. I left. I didn't even think about it. The guy came in the next day to my office and he said to me, he said, those are the nicest words anyone's ever said to me. Okay. So I didn't do it on purpose. What did that, again, is that I probably wasn't, that I learned that I wasn't listening to really with his questions. I didn't go enough. I didn't understand and I wasn't sharing his feelings. If I would have thought deeper, I could have done a better job. And I learned very much by accident.
Yeah. That goes back to, is it a skill or is it sometimes it is an accident, I guess, huh? I guess it's reps. So is not having empathy bad? Is there an opposite? Is there a downside?
it's not good.
I don't know. I'm asking the question. I don't have any answers. I just like asking the questions.
I know you do. I know you do. You know what? I don't really want to say if it's bad or good, but I'll say there's a whole lot of people in our society that do not have empathy.
Okay.
So maybe it's another human trait is lack of empathy.
Well, so I'm thinking about, I don't know, look at problems that exist and if there are solutions. And I think a lot of times you'll find out that the solution isn't there because people don't understand each other, you know? A lot of times that's communication, but sometimes you can, be communicating and still be missing each other and not understanding each other and still have the same problem exist, and that can go on for, hundreds of years as we've seen, right?
Yeah.
Well, again, if we show some empathy and we have an understanding and we share their feelings, that's a great place to start in any kind of negotiations. And that gives you, you're halfway up the stairway at that point in time. And I think if we don't do that, we never take any step. We're not taking the steps that you need to have a successful in real estate, a successful transaction for all parties involved.
Right.
It's not once, and I know, and we all know a lot of agents that are pretty one-sided.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think anytime we put ourselves first, I don't think we win. Right. I mean, at the end of the transaction, or whatever's going on, I don't think you feel like you've won unless you see everybody else feeling like they've won.
Yeah. Right. I mean, the nature of the business is I mean, hello, Article 1. It's it's
right.
It's one of those, the nature of our business is not putting ourselves first. I mean,
well,
yeah.
okay, but let's look at it from like a realistic level in transactions, and going back to negotiating. Maybe more important than everybody winning is everybody feeling like they won.
Right.
So it's not necessarily, you're not fighting for every side. If you're representing a seller trying to sell their house and some other brokerage brings an offer, your job to your seller is to get that done. And if you can make the buyer and their agent, their broker and all that feel like they got to win too, that's good. You're not fighting for them, but now we have a chance of the deal staying together and nobody, reducing the chance of getting sued and all that other kind of stuff. But it's not necessarily getting them the win. It's getting them to feel like they win. Is that fair? Does that make sense?
I think you're totally right. I firmly believe that, there doesn't have to be winners and losers. I mean, in a negotiation, there are counterparts, yes. And in a deal, the fundamental disagreement between buyers and sellers is the whole reason, we get together. But at the end of the day, I think a good transaction is when everybody's happy. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's semantics, because I think if they feel like they won, it's a win.
So I think Paula has a good question for you, John, which is, as president of NAR, throughout your year, was there an example where you had to sharpen that empathy skill, and maybe a story you can share with us?
Well, again, is that I think one of we have prepared speeches, and we go around the country and we say the same thing, and I know that after listening to at one meeting, that the speech I was going to give was not going to ring the bell there. And I totally scrapped it. And because it wasn't the story that they wanted to hear, so I could do some things, but what we were talking about wasn't working in that marketplace. So again, is that I learned that along the way that I better ask some more questions about what's going on. And this was an incident where there were some, political things going on with a board in an area. And I probably hadn't done as much research into it. We hadn't done as much research into it. So I learned that early on that you better sharpen have that pencil pretty sharp and get out there. It's not one size. Empathy is also, I think, understand one size does not fit all.
Right.
I just want to tell a quick story. Let me just tell a quick story, Lee, because I remember, John, when you were running for president, and you came to our region, a regional meeting, and I was our state president at the time. So I was at the podium, and I happened to be sitting, or not at the podium, but up on whatever the dais. And I happened to be sitting right next to the podium, and you guys are scheduled with your handlers and all that. It was time to give your stump speech, and you got ushered in, and you came up and you took out an index card, and you had like your points that you were going to talk about for your speech. And I happened to be sitting right next to you, and I'm like, look at what you talked about had nothing to do with your speech whatsoever. So you probably came in and read the room, or something happened to you on the way in and just kind of, said what needed to be said. So I thought it was awesome that I was spying on you and you did not follow your speech one bit.
Well, again, is that, okay, let's take it to another, is empathy, adaptability. Okay, so you may be halfway through it and you see a situation that's not going the right way. So you're understanding what's going on. And I think showing empathy is willing to say, okay, great, stop right here. Let's stop. It's time to talk about something else.
Right.
And I gave a sales meeting once, again, in front of a lot of people, and I had a notebook with me. I knew exactly what I wanted to say. Notebook looked like I had written down a lot of things, and I left the notebook on in the room, and the agent brought it back, and there was nothing in the note. I didn't have anything written down. And he thought that was, the guy thought that was pretty funny. Still talks about it today.
Hey, nothing wrong with a little drama. All right, so I've been writing down sort of the recipe, so to speak, for empathy, and y'all tell me how on the mark I am. We've got adaptability, trust, communication, sympathy, listening, understanding. What else goes in a sprinkle of this?
Well, Patrick asked earlier what the difference is between sympathy and empathy, and I know that comes up a lot when you talk about empathy. So, Brent, in your mind, what's the difference, or does sympathy belong in the recipe?
I mean, I think sympathy does belong in the recipe. I think there's a pretty big difference. Sympathy is, essentially, sympathy's. I don't want to say feeling sorry for someone, but sort of, understanding where they are. I think empathy is, in my view, is making sure that they know you're essentially in the boat with them, or to some degree that they feel like they're being understood, right? I don't need to necessarily feel how you feel, but I want you to be able to understand how you feel.
See, I would think you're describing empathy when you say that. I do think sympathy is more the sorry,
Okay.
A sympathy
Well,
card,
yeah.
sorry for your loss, that kind of a thing. That's where I don't know that I'm right, although I probably am. That's how I think of it in terms of sympathy, is like feeling sorry for someone.
Yeah.
I think that sympathy is empathy with sorrow, and without sorrow, empathy still has to have sincerity.
Okay.
Is it enough to be sympathetic? Is that okay?
I think it's a really good starting place.
Okay.
I mean, it may be enough in some situations. In other situations, they're going to need a little more. You feel sorry for me, big deal. What are you going to do about it?
So empathy is the next tier?
I think empathy
it is the
harder
next
than
tier. That's a great, I really do believe empathy is the next tier. And the other thing is that I believe that we can all learn to be in our daily life, and that goes back to education, Evan, that that you do a lot of, is that it's definitely a learned skill, and sympathy is okay. I feel sorry. Where's the next step? Okay, what can we do from here?
So go ahead.
I had an agent that had slipped and was in a cast. It couldn't do real estate for 4 months. Okay, I felt bad for him. What's the next step? That he had an in-office fee, and I suspended his fee for 2 months because he couldn't work. He couldn't sell real estate. We started to get. We made a plan. So yeah, I felt bad about the leg, and empathy is saying, okay, I think, where do we go next?
Well, I think that's a perfect example, because we can all sit around and feel sorry for somebody with that cast on, which is a legitimate thing, nothing wrong with that. But then to say, okay, well, now what's this person dealing with because of the fact that they're wearing a cast, right? And then help provide a solution if that's what they want or need, So I think that's a great differentiation right there.
That's perfect. Thanks, John. Mark Gould, how are you, sir? Good to see you. Empathy is a term we use for the ability to understand other people's feelings as if we were having them ourselves. That's right up your alley, Evan. Sympathy refers to the ability to take part in someone else's feelings, mostly feeling sorrowful about their misfortune. Yeah, I'm sorry for your loss. So yeah, I'd be on board with that. I
Does
was
it
just trying to
surprise
get the.
anybody that Mark sounds like Webster's dictionary?
No, really,
Right?
that's
I mean,
definitely.
it's so crazy sharp anyway. So
So I
What have we learned, guys? You know, what have we learned? What are we going to come out of this, you know, COVID as we start to come up? Minnesota just opened up restaurants today. You know, other states, you know, just 2 weeks ago, I think, Pennsylvania became essential. You know, that there are other states that, you know, that again, we're coming out at, and we're farther along at different states. What have we learned, do you think? One thing that I'd like to hear your answers, because I'd like to be able to communicate that with others.
I'm hoping that we will come out of this being more empathetic to people's health concerns, right? I mean, because I think in the past where people were, you know, didn't want to touch surfaces that they thought weren't really clean, or if somebody, like when we traveled, maybe someone was wearing a mask. We always kind of, I think generally people would just like dismiss that, or maybe even think, oh, hypochondriac or OCD or whatever, you know, and it's not any of that. So I think hopefully we'll all have a respect for the security that people feel.
Yeah.
See.
Yeah. Well, gosh, so many things, but what's coming to my mind right now is that we're not as smart or prepared as we might think we are, and we need each other to get through whatever is going to come our way. Because I know, you know, I'm a planner, and I like to be in control of things and all that. And then something shows up, no matter how many contingencies you have that nobody thought of. And then I needed people to figure out, what do I do next? I needed answers. I needed to help people with me figure out answers. Sometimes I needed advice from people who had better, who could better understand what was coming at me in terms of information. I masterminded with a bunch of different people at different times to work together to figure out what the next step is. And, you know, I'm a broker owner, been running a company for 20 years, and I need other people to do my best at helping other people.
Yeah.
I guess is that I will say that I learned quickly I needed to, in Zoom calls, that I needed to update my game. Okay, so I went up, bought a new Apple Pro. I didn't like how it looked. I've got at home, and I didn't even bring it in. I bought, I've got a ring with light on it. I've got ways I can do a video that I wouldn't have expected to do before. I watched Lee Brown and others that do really, really well at that. But I've learned we've got to up our game, and there's other ways from an association point of view. There are many other ways that we can communicate with our clients. So,
Yeah. I've just learned about balls in the air, right? We all kind of started to some degree with a clean slate, and just be careful, you know, when you start. We all had this full plate, and then our plate suddenly got empty in a matter of 24 hours, and now we get to choose what we put on it from now on, and we need to be careful. And I have failed several times in the past 8 weeks in doing that, but the good news is we all start over again. So I don't know what that has to do with empathy, but given this whole scenario, it's becoming clear that, you know, a lot of times our plates are a little too full. So just be careful what you put on it. So, well, I feel like we're kind of wrapping things up here. So what we'll do is go around the horn. Final thoughts from Lee and Evan, and then John will let you take us home. So, Lee, what you got for us? Final thoughts.
Yeah, I think empathy is important, and we need to be using it in our businesses, not just with our clients, but also with the agents that we deal with in transactions or just showings, you know, really at all in your office, your friends. It's just it's a really good skill to have at any time, but right now it seems more important than maybe it ever has.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Be more cognizant of it. Evan?
Yeah, I agree with Lee. Empathy is not new on my radar. You know, it's something I've read a lot about, tried to practice, teach other people. But in the last 10 days, I would say it has become more apparent to me than ever how much a lot of us lack empathy and get stuck in our own worlds, our own point of view. How do things affect us? And you truly, like, we need to all get better at feeling what other people are feeling to make progress.
And I hate that that's coming from you, Evan, because I feel like you're much more empathetic than the rest of us. So for you to say that, I feel like I've learned a lot of these traits sort of from watching you deal with tough situations and interact with people. So I feel like you're kind of the example. So to hear you say we need to be better really hurts my feelings because I'm not nearly as good as you. So anyway.
I appreciate you saying that. It hurts my own feelings too. And it makes me really, like, it gives me all kinds of conflicting feelings, and I think that's the point.
Yeah, that's it.
Maybe our next word should be internalize.
No. So John, take us home, sir. Final thoughts from you. Really appreciate you being here.
Well, it's been a great learning experience for me. And so I'm meeting with some agents later today to talk a little bit about this subject. And again, is that I think that Evan put it well, is that I have learned, as particularly in the last few weeks, I have a lot of growth on the empathy side that I could use myself. And I look at our world today in real estate and outside, and it's together we can go a long way. And that's the only way that we do it. And empathy is a word that's going to be, I'm going to add to on my little personal list of words that I will look at every day and try to improve. It's certainly, I've learned over the time, it's you can never stop learning. And I just want to thank all you guys. You are the four of us here, the three of you and people listening, is that you are part of the reason that this is the greatest business in the world. And it's my heart when gets warm, and it's just lovely for me to be with you all today. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate it. It makes our job a whole lot easier with leaders like you at the top. So we really appreciate your leadership and your vision and kind of moving things forward there. So that about does it. That's all the time that we have for today. Wanted to thank again to John Smaby, Lee, Evan. Appreciate you being here. Don't forget to like the page, subscribe to the page, and we'll see you next week. Y'all have a wonderful day.
John.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, Evan.